kind of sticking with the theme of fluids and trying to get, the concepts of like what types of questions will they ask us about in fluids. And I really kind of break them up into two categories. There's static fluids, and then there is dynamic fluids problems. So the static ones are, well, like this one here is a static problem. It's just water that's stayed in place and not moving around. And typically on these, you're having to do stuff with like density and using the Pascal's law of like what is the pressure at a certain location. And you just deal with like changes in volume and stuff like that. So these ones are, I don't know. I think that they're actually end up being harder than the dynamic problems. Dynamics are the ones that are like Bernoulli's equation, where you go from one section of a pipe to another section of a pipe. So Bernoulli's is all the continuity principle, conservation of energy principles. And so they really fall in those two categories as far as like free response or any type of questions go. But for this particular question, in this image that I have, what's going to happen is they're going to drop in this block. And once that block gets dropped in there, that water level is going to rise up to that dotted blue line. And that will be the delta H of how high the water goes up to when that block is submerged. So it says it's like, what do they say? Partially submerged, I guess. Let me read this again. It says placed in liquid and floats partially submerged, causing a change, delta H in the height of the liquid. As a result, pressure, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so maybe it'd be sitting something like that, like halfway in and out of the water as it started. So the first step is, and they want in a coherent paragraph length response to describe the forces acting on the cube and the liquid and explain how they result in the increase. So let's start with the cube. That cube is going to have gravity acting on it, of course, straight down. That would be mg. And then it's going to have a buoyant force. Virginia's here. Hey, Virginia.
Hi, Virginia. Sorry, I forgot.
That's right. We're just kind of starting in with the free response that was posted and walking through how to set up these kind of static problems. So that has a weight downward, but it would also have a buoyancy force, we'll call it F of B, that would be matching that weight. That way it wouldn't be accelerating up or down. And so you'd have a buoyancy force up and a weight down. Well, the bottom of the cube, so like then you have to explain the relevant forces acting on the liquid, and the liquid is going to have a weight to it. Let's just say draw from like the center of the liquid. It's going to have a weight mg of the liquid. This is mg of the cube. And then the force that's responsible for balancing that out as an upward force coming from the bottom of the container, that would be the normal force. So sorry, they kind of overlap, but if I could zoom in a little bit more, that's about it. So, your weight of the liquid is balanced by the bottom of the surface shoving up into that liquid, preventing it from falling out through the bottom. So the first couple points that you get is by correctly identifying those forces on the cube and on the liquid. And then you're supposed to explain how they result in an increase in pressure at the bottom of the container. Well, the way to understand that, let's just imagine the cube is taken out. So I don't think I can animate this anymore because if I select it, all that arrows and everything will move with it. But just imagine if I took that cube out, right? There would be a certain normal force from the bottom of the surface pushing up. I'm just going to use my coffee cup here. So there would be upward push on all the liquid that's inside of that to keep it from leaving the bottom of the container. Well, if you put a ice cube or a cube in there, what that's going to do is the liquid is going to push up on the cube with this buoyant force, So this force right here that I'm kind of highlighting or whatever, that upward force on the cube has to be matched with an equal and opposite downward push on the liquid by the cube. So you actually have this additional force downward on the liquid that we hadn't drawn in this first diagram, that's coming from the Newton's third law action-reaction pair of a downward push on the liquid by the cube. So in reality, now what's going to happen, I have these two downward forces, this normal force that I originally drew. Oops, back up. This normal force that I originally drew is now going to have to be bigger. And now that force there is increased to account for that downward push. So the way that that normal force or that pressure actually increases, the push on the bottom of the container, is because when that cube gets submerged, there's a buoyant force up on the cube, and that's going to push right back on the liquid. And then that liquid's going to shove harder into the bottom of the surface. And so the surface has to shove up harder in response to that. And that's what increases the pressure. So that is the paragraph. And just to kind of show you what the rubric for that would be. Oh no, re-enter password. Use my face. Thanks. Questions so far? Anyone? Is that? Oh, hey Jacob, I didn't see you joined. Nice to see you. So far, does anyone have questions on that idea? Yes, no, maybe so.
No.
No. Okay. So it's not letting me show you the rubric. Well, I can't show you the rubric, so I'll just tell you that it was worth like 5 points. You get 1 point for just explaining that idea in a clear, coherent paragraph. You get 1 point for correctly identifying the forces. So 1 point for a paragraph, 1 point for the identifying the forces that were on the cube as gravity and buoyancy. A 3rd point for identifying the forces on the liquid as, well, first of all, without the cube in there, it would just be normal force and gravity. With the cube in there, it's normal force, gravity, and the additional downward push of the cube on the liquid. Then you got so that's up to what? That's 3. You got a 4th point for describing, let's see, that when you put the cube in, it has an equal and opposite reaction force down in the liquid. And then the 5th point was for describing that increased push down in the liquid results in a larger force overall. So just to kind of recap on that, part A, when you put the block in, it pushes down on the liquid, and that is what increases the pressure at the bottom. All right, part B, write an expression for the pressure at the bottom of the container in terms of H, delta H, and physical constants. Well, when you write out Pascal's principle, which is like the pressure at any location should equal the initial pressure plus rho GH. That's like the basic formula, and that's what's on the toolkit. But I want us to kind of recall where that's even coming from, because like that looks like a bunch of mixed up variables. Like, how is rho GH actually a measure of pressure? That doesn't make sense at first. So back to what pressure is in its essence. Pressure is just an amount of force per area. And so if you take a force per area, it really, what we're describing, the type of force that we're using, is the amount of weight of something. That's the force that we're having felt, like sitting on top of us. All of the weight of the fluid above us, all the air above us, is what's pushing on us in that cross-sectional area on our body. So that force that we're feeling is really the weight of all the fluid, the mg of the fluid that we're sitting in, spread out over that cross-sectional area. That's the pressure that we're feeling. So when we do this container, just kind of draw a little picture off to the side, it has, right, a certain volume that would be given by this cross-sectional area Live broadcast has stopped due to attempted to start. Is someone attempting to start to broadcast? No? Okay. I don't know. If you're trying to project your screen, it's going to kick me out of my screen, but that's fine. You can just tell me you want to project something real quick. But I don't know. Maybe it's just a glitch. Anyway, you can still see iPad screen, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So this cross-sectional area A times a height H would equal a volume, right? A times H, like just an area of a cylinder, times the height of a cylinder would equal the volume of that cylinder. So when you start to think about how you could substitute in what is the mass of all this fluid here, all of this liquid inside that has a mass to it, instead of interpreting it as mass, you could just use the density of that fluid times the volume of that fluid. So treating it as like rho v actually helps us, and it kind of unlocks a different part of this. And so,
Mr. Powers,
yes,
did your, at least for me, it said your screen left. Like
yeah,
the
we can't see your
Benjamin Power
screen
with
anymore.
your screen left. Yeah.
So you can see me, but you can't see the iPad.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't see your notes at all.
Give me a second. So yeah, it says it was going to kick me out of the Google Meet. Let's try this. Rejoin. Oh, that's it. It was updating. Can you see my ceiling fan now?
No.
Yes, I can see your.
It's cropped for me. I'm on my phone, so.
It's on the side, yes.
Okay, just a second here. Present screen. Start broadcast. There's always a solution.
There we go.
There. Back? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So kind of where to just back up a little bit. What I was talking about is I could express the volume of this liquid as just the area of that cylinder times the height of the column of liquid that's in there. That is really the volume of water that I have, just area times H. So if you go back up to here, I was talking about the weight, mg, of that fluid. And so all mass is, if I talk about all the mass of that water, I could just express that in density and volume terms. Mass is just a rho v quantity. So the density of the fluid, rho, times the volume of that fluid, v, which is, remember, just area times H. That is the same thing as saying mass. So up in this numerator, what I really have is, let's write this out one more time. I really have rho times area times H times G, right? Because area times H is actually just volume. And I have all that divided by area. Well, there goes your area. And so rho GH that I'm left over with, rho GH is the way of expressing that pressure. So I kind of want to just back up and I mean, we did that derivation right at the beginning, but when you jump to this, it's not that obvious that where rho GH is coming from, at least if we haven't reviewed this stuff yet. So, so this is really then we're going to operate off this equation to determine the expression. So the pressure at the bottom should just equal whatever starting pressure there was, the initial pressure, which is a constant, like it's like the air pressure. So you can use that as a physical constant. And then we're going to add the rho of the liquid times G times, and the total height that we're dealing with, let's go back over this column. When the cube is in there, it's these two put together. So delta H and H all put together. So that's really the height of the column that we want to use. So we'll give that in terms of H plus delta H. And that would be how we solve that one. Questions on that, or ideas, interruptions, things that you want me to clarify?
None for me.
Okay. All right. We'll do this last one, and then we'll go over like how we're going to finish out the year and AP exam information. But let's start in with C. So this one's a little bit harder. You have to derive a formula for delta H in terms of the volume of the cube and other given quantities and physical constants as appropriate. So for this, you kind of have to do a couple different things. You really have to talk about what is leading to this change in pressure at the bottom. And I'm not sure, like, I'm trying to think of like a way that, how would you know what to express just by looking at it? I guess like the two conditions that you have or that you're kind of thinking about is like, what is going on with this problem before the cube is in, and what is going on with this problem after the cube is in the liquid. There was a certain, if you imagine, there's a certain pressure that existed down at the bottom of this tank before you put that cube in. And then as we said in the first problem, part A, once you put that cube in, that pressure is going to go up. So there is a change in pressure at the bottom, and we kind of work off of that principle. How do you express that change in pressure for this problem? So the first thing you can do is the change in pressure. That's like from some starting pressure to a different one, is really just going to be only because of this additional increase in height. So think about it as like there was a pressure that existed before when you were just at a height h. Then there was a new pressure with this total column height of h plus delta h. So if you want to talk about the change in pressure, it's really only a factor of that change in height. It's really only because this additional height of water got on there. The density of the fluid didn't change. The gravitational constant didn't change. So it's really delta H is controlling the change in pressure. So technically all you have in this is the rho of the liquid times G times delta H. That's how one way you can express the change in pressure. A different way that you can express the change in pressure is through the amount of force that was added to the system. So I want you to think about like, what did you add weight-wise to the system when you put a block in? Well, the surface was already supporting the liquid itself, and now you put a block with a certain amount of weight in there, and the change in pressure is going to be equivalent to that weight. So in that case, you have the force per area added by the block. It's the force of gravity of the cube. And that's really just the mg of the cube over the area. Instead of saying mg, I could just say the rho of the cube times volume of the cube times g over a. So I have two equivalent expressions now for delta P. One that's phrased as in terms of delta H, one that's phrased in terms of the properties, the volume of that cube. And so what I can do is I'm going to set the two equal to each other. So I'll say rho L times G times delta H is equal to rho of cube times volume of cube times G over A. You have a G on both sides of the equation and no terms added, so you can cross that out. And we want to determine delta H, so you want to get this all by itself. Divide by rho L, divide by rho L, and your final expression then becomes that the delta H is equal to rho of Q over rho of liquid times volume of cube over area of the cylinder. So again, derivation problems. This might lead us into talking about the AP exam next, as far as like what they announced yesterday. They haven't typed. They said they were going to put this on their website so that I could just like show you guys in reference, but they haven't typed up what they determined. Pretty much, they don't care if you have open notes because they can't control that. And so at first glance, it's like, oh my gosh, game changer. I can have all my notes open. I can have textbooks open. I can have internet tabs open. But the point is that the reason they're not too concerned about that, especially for physics, is you can't Google the questions that they're going to have. There's no answer to this out, this problem online, or at least the problems that they're going to give you. There's no like solutions already created. So it's more of how you interpret that problem and how you set it up and solve, rather than like how quickly you can find the information. And because of that, they're not going to award. This is like for all subject areas. They're purposely picking questions that would not allow any points to be earned just by knowing content. So for world history, AP US history, AP, all the languages, if there's anything that you could use Google to find out, like Google Translate, or just look up a date or look up an idea, none of those types of questions are going to be given. So it's all going to be essays and things where you have to show your understanding of the ideas, rather than being able to like kind of game it by having stuff open. So they also said like they're aware that people are going to try to use like race to Reddit to try to like start threads as the test is going and see but honestly, if you have like 15 to 20 minutes to actually work out a solution, the penalties for cheating would far outweigh that. He was talking about that they have all these things that they're going to implement as far as like how they can test for this, as far as they have people monitoring chat logs, chat rooms, and then they also have all this like software that they're using to see if your answers match something or someone else's. And so they report that to every college and every university that you are submitting applications to if you get caught, which is like, I don't know, would scare me enough away from trying it. But there's going to be some people that's the game of this, is they're going to try to figure out a way around it. But in that amount of time, I don't know, you almost just have to put your head down and finish the problem and submit, because then if you don't submit in the time, they don't count it. It's not like you can't, oh wait, I had internet issues or something like that. It's just you submit and then that's it. They give you 20 minutes for the problem, and then you have 5 minutes to submit your answer. So I'll kind of go to that next, the AP exam info, and then we'll finish on what questions you might have and how we're going to finish the end of the year. So AP exam, open notes, they don't really care if you have your notes open, so you're welcome to kind of organize that ahead of time. You can do it from a mobile or a laptop, and there's kind of pros and cons with each. If you do it from a mobile phone, you have to like read the prompts through that mobile phone and then take the picture and submit through that. And so you'd have to be reading the question prompt and solving it down on a sheet of paper, taking a picture of your solution, and then you send that off. And that's what they would take. So you'd have like 20 minutes to work out your solution on paper, writing it out or sketching it out, and then you would take a picture. And then that sends off. You could technically read the prompt on your laptop, write all that out, take a picture with your phone, send it to your computer. But that I would be nervous about. If something goes wrong with like sending it over to the computer, or I'm trying to airdrop it and it's not working, or it's too big of a file or something like that, and that's lagging, when you only have that 5 minutes to get it submitted, I would worry about you running into issues with that. So if you're doing mobile, I would just kind of read it on a mobile, write it out on paper, take a picture, and then you click submit. If you're doing it on a laptop, you can type out your answers. So it might depend on the AP exam. Maybe for like an English AP exam, it might be better to just type out what you're thinking. But for physics, I'm not really sure if it would be more beneficial, less beneficial to be writing. They said they will send out some like practice with the like a simulation that you can try out ahead of time to see, okay, which format would I rather do this with? But that's something to be aware of. There's just going to consist of 2 questions, a 20-minute question and a 15-minute question. And so as far as physics goes, they're supposed to announce today more of like the format of that, like what type of question, but they don't have that up yet. So he didn't announce it in this like press conference that they gave last night, but it will be a 20-minute and a 15-minute question. Each of those have a 5-minute turn-in time. So after you're done with the question, like it'll stop that. It'll say, now you need to submit your answer. And the clock will start for that. And then you'll have that 5 minutes to turn it in. This year, we actually get scores back, which is new. They're going to send all of the AP teachers your responses. And we used to never get to see those. And so that kind of leads me to like end of the year grading and that kind of stuff. I am not going to grade the end of the year based on, how you did on that AP exam. I get to see your score, but I'm not going to base it off of that. Pretty much what I decided to do is if when I get that back, if you showed an improvement or basically if you did well, like a 3, 4, or 5 is what I'm thinking. If you got a 3, 4, or 5 on the AP exam, I would override whatever score you currently had, basically bumping that up. So like B plus becomes an A becomes an A plus kind of thing. I mean, if you're at a D or a C, which I mean, I'm looking at the people in here, none of you are, so this probably doesn't pertain to you. But if you're at a D or a C, and you showed like if you got a 4 or 5 on that AP exam, then I would bump it up even higher. I'd just override your grade. I wouldn't use it to penalize you though. So let's say you're at an A and you just totally tank this format of the AP exam because it's just so different and you're not used to it. I'm not going to go back and then downgrade you to like a C or something like that. So it's only going to help you when we get those scores back. And they said we get them back in like mid-May, like right after you take it. So they're going to try to score them right away and get it back to us like May 26th is what they claimed. Now, the exact day for testing, it's supposed to be in this week of May 11th through, I think it's like a 1 week period, May 11th. Again, they're going to check on that, but they did a survey of like the whole nation, at least select schools and stuff, and more students wanted to take it earlier than later, like in June or July, because they were worried that they would forget information, that it wouldn't be as solid. And so they are deciding to do it like that second week in May and do all the testing there. I don't know if it's a thing where like, I think it's like the physics test then will be at 4 o'clock on Thursday, and you have to make that time. They do have a makeup, and at first they kind of made it sound like you could pick whichever time you want, but they're treating it the same way they do the normal one, where if you're not able to make that first one, you have to have a really valid excuse of why you couldn't. So like deathly sick, your whole like power goes out, like internet is down, you honestly just can't perform the test. There has to be something that would prevent you from doing that. So and then you would schedule for the makeup. So that has to be done with our AP coordinator, Mrs. Hatch. If there was some reason that you could not take the test on the day that they are indicating, maybe there's a death in the family or a funeral or something like that. But it's kind of like it's reserved for has to do the makeup, not just like which one would you rather do.
Is there nothing for if like, I know you said power goes up, but what if it's just like simple connectivity or tech issues? Are they not going to let you?
I don't think they're going to have too much leniency. They're going to have support. If people know that they have dodgy internet connection already, they're going to have things that they're going to have you test ahead of time and like make sure that this is in place, so that doesn't happen. But I don't think that they're going to get into a whole bunch of like, I tried to submit it, but then it was lagging. Like if they have enough proof of like, yes, there was, because if there was something that truly does go wrong, yeah, they're going to have to work with you. But pretty much they're assuming that if you're choosing to do it this way, you're going to take the time to get yourself set up in a location that's quiet and that you can work on it and submit, and then it should be fine. So, yeah, and again, they're supposed to release more info later today, but have like a summary, and I'll direct you guys to that when that comes out, but they haven't typed it up yet. So they just announced all this last night. Other questions?
Well, I guess I'm kind of like AP Classroom has been proven like time and time again to fail. So I'm
It's
just
a different program. Yeah. So right. I'm with you when this guy, it's like the president of the company is saying like that they're literally working around the clock to develop the software and system that they're going to use. Makes me nervous because the last product that they put out had a lot of issues. Um, I think this is easier, honestly, for what's going to happen when you just push out a single thing at a certain time and it has to go out to your. That's like a lockdown screen. That's just like now everyone is getting this displayed at the same time, and then you submit your answers in and it goes back. I think there's less chance for them to screw that up. It's not like they haven't proofread the questions, or a lot of the issues that we're having with AP Classroom is just like the content isn't always matched up right, and then now with the high traffic of everyone getting on there, that's been an issue. But I think that they're apparently developing this through a separate company website thing. So probably someone that already has success doing this kind of thing is going to be running it, and they're just using their platform. So instead of them like making up their own, which they did with AP Classroom, I bet it's going to be more streamlined. But you're right. We don't know for sure. So we can only hope. I do think it's like for anyone that was going to take an AP exam, this could be the time to actually like, I'm just thinking like we have so much more time to get ready, and there's only 2 questions that like, if you're pretty well prepared at like taking these 5 weeks, right now we have 5 weeks until this is going to happen. Spending 5 weeks getting yourself ready, and I know you have other classes going on, but spending 5 weeks getting ready, hey Harper, it's going to be like, I think we could do really, really well comparatively. Like usually it was we end the year, and then we have a week of review in class, and then we try to take the AP exam. And instead, now you guys have as much time as you're willing to put into it, which I know other things going on, but compared to most years, way less things going on for some of you. We don't have the extracurriculars. We don't have all the other stuff that typically distracts us, which is sad because we want to do all those things. But I also think that's going to lead to much better scores with the students that are taking these tests. So that's my 2 cents on that. Any questions?
I'm just kind of confused by the AP board because I thought they said you would be able to choose from an earlier or later date, but it looks like we can't. Okay.
No, it's kind of just yeah. I think this all was in motion, and they were trying to figure out 2 different. They wanted to provide still like time windows of when you could take the test, and so they got back down to having the time that was most voted on by people all across the nation. Again, I don't know how they did that survey, but they apparently sent it out to people in AP Classroom, and more students voted to have it taken early. And so, yes, there are 2 different time windows, but what he's saying is that this would be very similar to how the test is normally ran, where if there's circumstances where you can't take the earlier test, like in mid-May, well, then you would take the makeup one, but you wouldn't want to like it's not like a pick and choose thing, because the AP coordinator has to like approve special accommodations. They have to basically present a case of why you couldn't make the first one. And if it's just because like, well, I wanted to give myself more time, they're not going to accept that one. So it's the same thing with like how the normal exam runs. Like you have to have a pretty valid excuse of why you don't take the normal test on time. And so that's what they're doing with this also. Any other questions? Okay, so real quick about the end of the year, how are we going to finish out for everyone else that's not taking the test? I talked a little bit about those of you who are taking the test. I can provide a little bump in your grade based on how you do. If you do good on the AP exam, I'll bump your grade up from whatever it is. If you do bad on the AP exam, I don't touch your grade. I'm not gonna use that to downgrade you. So AP exam aside, the other thing that I want to do is for you guys, I'm going to try this, and I'll kind of finalize how this will look over spring break. But what I'm going to have you do is you're going to get back your old exams. Okay. And I don't want to try to give some BS final that everyone's going to cheat on and not really take. I mean, you can't really control that. So instead of giving you a final this way, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a copy of your old exams. This might be overly ambitious, but I think I can do this. So I'm going to scan them. And you're going to get a file of your old exams. What I want you to do is basically you look over and identify weaknesses, areas that you made mistakes, and you are going to kind of summarize what was most difficult in that section, what kind of skills, misconceptions did you have when you took that test, as you take some time and look over them. And then we're going to just kind of do a one-on-one reflection of that. So you have time to even kind of like think about this and, okay, in the fluids unit, this is what I was missing. I tried to do, I missed this problem here. And you could even like talk through it as like referencing which problems you missed and what you think went wrong with that. And it's just to reflect on what was the mistake, and then what do you have in mind at this point that is correcting for that, or that you would not do that same thing again. I'm not going to put you on the spot where you have to, okay, now solve X equals Y, blah blah blah. Like, you don't have to perform on the video. It's just you kind of preparing ahead of time, thinking about your old exams and what misconceptions or ideas that you struggled on during that time, and then you reflect on that, and we just talk it out and we say bye-bye because we don't get to see each other. So that is kind of how I'm thinking we'll finish out the year. Feedback or ideas or concerns about that idea. Again, I'll try to formally type this up like how it should look over spring break, but this is where I'm starting.
Are we going to be like writing down stuff and then like talking about what we write down, like our thoughts, or is it all going to be?
Yeah, sorry. No, yeah, you can definitely do that. Like, you could, so
or
like
no,
let's
like,
say,
is that like the assignment to like write, like the do
no,
list as
I'm not going to look over. Like, if you want to have yourself like some notes to reference, I'm just going to be talking to you in a conversation. Okay, let's just take me through the fluids unit. Like, what happened on that test? What did you learn? What's the biggest idea that stood out that you fixed? Okay, tell me about the thermodynamics test. And so you're really just going to be reflecting on where were times this year that I fell short or missed a concept or didn't do something perfectly, that kind of idea, which is really what all I really care about, is that you progress, like that you learn something from this process. It's not going to be valid for me to try to give a end of year, what do you know about all of AP Physics? So this is kind of the closest I could get to some sort of self-reflection over this content, and I think it'll be pretty low-key, a pretty easy way to end the year. But I'm going to work on like getting all those things scanned over spring break. And I'm probably just not going to do a little bit of school over spring break, but that way I have that ready to go, and I can get that out to you so that in the last few weeks of April, you can look those over and kind of prepare for that meeting. And then we'll just send out a bunch of times throughout the last week of school that you can log in and chat. So it should only take like 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to talk through that stuff. And that will be your final grade. So that is what I have for you today. Any questions? Just a bunch of blank mics and blank videos.
I have a question, but I really enjoyed the video of your daughter walking.
Yeah, she hasn't done it since, so she.
And I told my mom too. She enjoyed it.
Yeah, she just keeps defying. Like, this is like a week ago now. She was like, "Oh, she's walking. She's gonna be walking pretty soon." Nope, she's just, every time we try, she just goes back to crawling because it's way easier. So it's very much a good metaphor for life, how we stick to what's easy for us, because challenging ourselves puts us out of our comfort. Okay, that's enough. That's it, guys. I'll see you later. If you got other questions, follow up. And
Thanks, Mr. Powers.
yeah, have a good day.
He's good.
See you later. Have a good break.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Yes.
Yep, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.